Okay. And I'll pray, and are you gonna pray?
Yeah, sure.
We'll all pray.
We're all going to say a piece.
We're all gonna say a little piece, say a little song for you. Okay. God, thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for Bill having a little holiday and getting to have a break. Thank you for everybody who joined us here in person and online. And thank you for Jesse coming to join us tonight and share his experiences with this program and with us. Please be with everyone who isn't here, who didn't make it, who wanted to come and couldn't, who wanted to come and isn't even in that place to consider coming yet, who needs this program. I pray for everybody who is out there struggling without a solution, and I pray that we all continue on our own recovery so that we can bring the message to the people around us who need it. Amen. Jesse.
God, allow me to be open, void of self. Allow the audience to be open, void of self. Allow there to be a clear channel between us and the audience. Allow people to hear what they need to hear. And thank you for getting us all together at this time to go over, very key aspects of a relationship with you. Amen. Okay, so we're going to start off at our actors, self-centered, egocentric. But what I'd like to do is kind of sum up some of the main keys that we've already gone through at this point. So we've obviously gone through, how it works, the 12 steps. I mean, this is read at every meeting. I don't want to go over that. What I do want to go over is the A, B's, and C's. So A, B, C, in the original manuscript, it says this: our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after have been designed to sell you 3 pertinent ideas, which is A, B, and C. A, that you are alcoholic and cannot manage your own life. B, that probably no human power could relieve your alcoholism. And C, that God can and will, period. So it is to say that all the information read up to this point, if it's to be diluted to 3 simple ideas, it is the A, B's, and C's, which is very important. How do you take X amount of chapters of information and put it all down to a certain number of ideas? And that is A, B's, and C's. Not only that, as it does say that all the information presented before this is designed to sell you on that, right? Most important being that God can and will, period. Anything to say on that?
Nope.
The first requirement that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives may be good. If you are now convinced, you're now at step 3, which is that you make a decision to turn your life and your will over to the care of God as you understand him. Just what do we mean by that, and just what do we do? The first requirement is that you see that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So the first requirement of step 3 is to understand that self needs to be out of that equation. When it comes to step 3, there is very few steps in any of our programs and in the book that's so confused. Why I believe that is because to get to step 3 takes absolutely no work. 4 and 5 on, you have to do a 5 before you get to do any of those other steps. So it's quite often that you'll get people who, were around these programs, not actually getting into any work, coming into these rooms, hearing this opinion, hearing that opinion, forming their own opinion. The book itself is these programs, right? Black and white, it can't be contested. This is it, right? This only gets confused in the rooms, right? What I find happens is step 3 is probably one of the most confused steps, people believing that they have to find the spirit on that step, people stalling out on this step before they find it. That's not what we're looking for, right? There's certain aspects in here that we'll read, and I'll point that out. But if we're talking about what are some main fundamental ideas that we have to have in order to get this step, it's the absence of self-will. First requirement is that you see that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. Tricky thing about that is an individual comes here with addiction issues, drugs, let's say alcohol, whatever the case may be. That's the main thing, right? So when they come into this program, you know, we talk about substance, no problem for me to have something beyond myself for that issue, right? As I go through the 12 steps, the drug and the drink issue subsides, my life takes off, God's nowhere to be found. Does that make sense? So it's only out of a bottom of self that somebody can actually understand self itself. The first requirement is that we say that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. It's quite common to come in here, believe that the drink and the drug's the main issue, right? Minus the drink and the drug, my one-time good character will come back, right? It was only out of a second bottom, which is the bottom of self, that I was able to understand 3 and in turn understand 6. Are there any quick questions on that? Do you guys do a question period at the end, or how does that kind of work?
We usually just go questions as they need to be, but do you want to talk a little bit more about, you know, like your ideas around how long it takes to hit an emotional bottom if you're working a good program, and that if you are surrounded by people who are also working a good program?
Emotional bottom is difficult because emotional bottom is where an individual is going to drink. By the time they get to that spot, there's no God in their life at all. Right? So it is almost seems to be a necessary part of the process. Somebody comes in, you know, generally 6 months, their life starts to take off. They needed a job. Maybe they got that. They needed a place. Maybe the wife comes back, these types of things. And they actually have something of a life, but no God or spirit anywhere in there. Dishonesty seeps into these areas. The same dishonesty that I'll use in my relationship or my career is the exact same dishonesty that I'll drink and use with. So it's only a matter of time before the self-centered nature will bleed in and eventually will cause me to drink. Typically, that's 9 months to a year-ish.
Yeah.
Typically.
I see that as people graduate from treatment centers. It's kind of like, and I think that comes into the insidiousness of it, is that you think you have an idea of God. You think that you're actually getting these things, you know, you're getting your car back, you're doing the things, you're saying the little prayers, and not really understanding how self is going to take you out, because you don't even know what you're looking for. A lot of times it's dressed up as like the loneliness, and it's the insidious stuff that is really going to take a grasp at, and you don't know. So I was thinking about this earlier today. I was thinking about the mental blank spot. And really, I kind of conceptualize that for myself as that is self. The mental blank spot is self. And self blocks me off from God. And from that place, I get spiritually sick. And so it's self is the blank spot. And in defects and in self, I'm blocked off from God, and I have a spiritual sickness, and it will come a time that I will drink and use again because I need a power greater than myself kind of thing. I would say though, at step 3, people really don't know what they're signing up for. So what do you say to people when they say, how do I turn my will over?
Well, we'll get to that a little bit more. For example, in what usually happens, it describes what it looks like when you are running the show. You need a compass, right? You need like a barometer. A lot of the times it's pressure builds up, right? Pressure builds up, always built up in my life. If I have a couple of drinks or whatever the case may be, I could relieve that pressure. Problem is I have the allergy to the body, and that subjects me to drink for however length of time, right? And it centers in the body. It does not center in the mind. So eventually my mind will catch up with my body. Looks like a conscious choice for a week. After a week, I don't want to drink, and I'm in this hellish torture for months, right? So when we talk about step 3 and not understanding what you're getting into, a lot of people will talk about how do you know you're on 3 as you're on 4. And I have always liked, you know, why I like that is because, you know, there's certain rooms, there's certain pockets of these programs that believe you get stalled out on this step. You're stalled out in this step, you will surely drink.
You hear those people that are like, yeah, I was 1, 2, 3 out, 1, 2, 3 out.
Yeah.
Well, you were never 1, 2, 3 out, because the end of 3 says we're launching on a program of action, and then we are at step 4, and that's where it ends in the literature, is that we've launched. And so you know you're done step 3 when you've already started step 4.
Definitely. Any questions on that?
Would I be able to use the step 0 promise to test much longer how my recovery looks?
Good point. Problem is that if you've let it go to that point where you at, you know what I mean? Like if you are at that point and you're all of that, you're fucking already, you've already drunk, you're drunk already. If not, you're legit drinking at the time. That is a good point though, because ideally you're not going to hit absolutely all of them. You know, but some problems in your relationships, you know, full of fear, unuseful. Yeah, I mean, if you're hitting a couple of those, nothing wrong with that.
I think too that I'm thinking back to when I was in Medicine Hat. It was around the time that you, Bill, and I were actually talking about this sort of thing, and how the theory of God is it's good until it's like you're in something. You have a decision to make. You're coming up against the unknown and that fear, and that's kind of the barometer. Is how do you face the fear, and how do you step into the unknown, and how do you let go of the things you know that you need to. And like when you're if everything's all good, chances are you're not really doing what you got to do, because you have to be letting go of self, and that's uncomfortable. You know, in the literature in the 12 by 12, it says that there's always an emotional surrender or emotional turmoil before the surrender. And so that comes every time you're up against yourself, and you're relinquishing self comes with this emotional turmoil before the surrender of it. And so for me, it was like Bill and Jesse we were having this conversation, and I hadn't gone through anything yet. I had come out of treatment. I was getting the job. Like I had all the things happening to me that, you know, happen as a result of not drinking. And then I hit a wall where it was like, now I had to actually go into the unknown and make a decision that was really, really scary. And that's where I got all the pain. And so we were talking about like, now God's everything that you need, you know, because the uncertainty comes, and then am I going to do what I've always done and revert back into what I know? Or am I going to take the leap, and is God everything and is God nothing? And if God's everything, then this uncertainty, I can get through it and push through it. And that's kind of what I held on to. So the barometer for me at the beginning was like, for the step 3 stuff, it was like, you know, understanding that God's in all the bad. And I don't know what I just know that it's feeling like I need to make a move, and it's scary. And that was kind of what Bill was warning me about all along, was you're going to come up against this, and you're going to be full of fear trying to make the next move. And so I knew that that was coming up, and that I had to lean into it. So the barometer for me was like, how do I make a move and let go of what I know and make God everything? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so what usually happens, the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think that life doesn't treat him right. Right, so that means, you know, I go into work tomorrow and they don't value me, or they don't pay me enough, or my clients don't care for me. And then I go into my relationship and she doesn't really love me, and she takes advantage of me, and blah, blah, this and that and that. When I am in a position where life doesn't treat me right as a whole, the odds are I'm running the show in one way, shape, or form, and I just have to trace that back. Still, the play does not suit him, admitting he may be somewhat at fault. He's sure other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? So the show doesn't come off very well. I begin to think that life doesn't treat me right. I become angry, indignant, and self-pitying. So when we talk about, you know, running the show, and like, you hear that a lot, running the show. Me running the show, I am making decisions in my own life, and those decisions are not grounded or tethered to anything, right? It means I'm coming up with these shoddy, intuitive thoughts and decisions over time, and I'm making some pretty crooked, unguided moves, right? Easiest way to hedge against that is to bring in God-centered pillars on my decisions. It's the easiest way. So especially, you know, you get a couple of years, you know, these intuitive thoughts that come out of 11, if you're going to act on them right out of the gate, you're going to get yourself into a fucking world of hurt that you do not see coming at all. This is why early recovery, it's best to funnel all decisions through a sponsor, God-centered pillars. That's how you hedge against this right? A lot of people understand that they can't trust their thinking in regards to the drink and the drug, sure, right? Eventually we get to that point. Simple fact is I can't trust my thinking in any facet of life. It's a simple fact. Janine, anything?
Yeah, I was just thinking like it's kind of reminding me of if I asked, you know, my mom about something, or somebody who's not in the program that's close to me, who I would have sought advice from before, they're all, you know, messed up with what society thinks. And that's usually fear driven around, got to get the job, you got to get the money. You can't, you know, take a move because you're going to maybe throw your economic security. And if you do this, you're going to maybe throw your marriage, which is then going to impact you. All these fear-based advice that I was getting, or just stuff that isn't logical at all, that would bring myself in. And, you know, one of the advice I got in early recovery was do a pros and cons sheet. And I'm like, that is unhelpful, because I'm in there with my own thoughts and I'm trying to lay it on paper. And what am I doing? I'm assuming the worst and I'm full of fear. And then I end up with this pros and cons sheet that's just all me and fear. And so I need the 12-step people around me so that they can guide me of the principles in this program and not the ways of the world. Otherwise, it's not just my thinking, it's everybody else's around me, because they're so in their own versions of self, running their own shows based on their own beliefs that usually come from a combination of society influences and other things. So it's really important when you're trying to live a God-centered life and to be taking steps in a direction that thy will be done, that you're talking to other people who understand the concept of thy will be done and what that looks like, making moves so that we don't let fear or selfishness or loneliness or, you know, what other people want for us guide the way, because then we're lost again.
Okay, our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The preacher who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him, and the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever their protestations are not, these people mostly concerned with themselves, their resentments, or their self-pity. And that's already underlined. That's underlined in all your handouts, is that correct? And so when we're talking about true freedom of the human spirit, you know, when we talk about humility, we talk about serenity, you know, we talk about a strong God-centered sense of self, which is to say that I could walk into any situation and I don't have to be cocky, nor do I have to be afraid. I'm able to understand who I am and have a resolve, a limitless power of resolve that's not based in self, right? It's not based in pride, which is a flash in the pan, right? As quickly as I'm better than you is as quickly as I'm less than you. And that could happen within a seconds, right? It's split seconds. I could be up and down all day. I mean, originally coming in here, it's very common that an individual has burnt it all down to the ground. And there's a ton of anxiety, some remorse, bitterness on a lot of the things that are blown up. So it makes a lot of sense as per society is concerned that an individual, when they get in here, they're going to be making up for lost time, right? Well, I mean, fundamentally, why are they doing that, right? When you look at a fear of failure, it's not necessarily that I know that I have failed, it's that you've seen me fail, right? It's more of a fear reputation. It's often people come in here, they try and build the world of the material right away, typically because they have no character. So I am what I drive, I am what I do, that is who I am. You take all that away, I feel as though I'm nothing. Of course, you know, my hands are tied. I have to work on culture and character before my material needs are met. But the simple fact is, especially when you get to the or whatever program, people generally don't give a fuck. And why that is because they're more concerned about themselves, especially in these programs for sure. These people don't give a fuck what you drive, nor what you do. Maybe if it's better than what they drive or what they do, they might care. But for the most part, in these rooms and in society, people are more concerned about themselves, what they drive, what they do. And when you have a fundamental understanding of that, that's where you could actually start to grow on your own. Whether that be working out, whether that be going to school at, you know, in your 40s or 50s, whatever. You could do whatever you want without the fear of being judged, without fear of reputation, but it is a fundamental understanding to the gut level that nobody's paying attention to you. And why you believe they're paying attention to you is because you are fucking selfish and self-centered, which is that is to the core of the alcoholic act, is the selfish, self-centered nature that we have to be rid of. And the more we bring God into self, the less what I've just described as a parent, self-centered nature, the more you could actually grow into who you are and who you're meant to be. Shane?
The best way I can bring God into self. Quickest, most efficient.
Quickest, most efficient, I would say 10 and 11. But I mean, even if I just said 10, you're cheating yourself. If I just said 10 and 11, you're fucking yourself. It has to be 10, 11, 12, right? This is where sponsorship comes in. This is where a family unit could be beneficial. There's a lot of spirit that could be found in a family unit. Obviously, you don't have the ability to be calling sponsees and working with sponsees all day long. It's not possible. So you have to pack into society. You have more time in society than you ever will in any of these programs. You know, even if you go to a meeting, there's an hour, work with a guy afterwards. That's, 2.5 hours, maybe 4 hours tops a day. What are you doing from fucking 6 in the morning to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, 6 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Packing into society, hopefully. Janine?
Yeah. So I think that, like what Jesse was saying about I am this, I am that, based on how you feel about me and the addiction to the validation. And a lot of that, like when we come into recovery, we're not only are we maybe trying to overcompensate or not let ourselves be seen in a negative light some more, but I don't think anybody really knows who they are coming into the program or into recovery, or if they ever stopped and think about it, even normal people, because we are so used to the external validation, and then we blow in the wind, like Jesse was talking about, where it's like we didn't get the feedback we wanted, so we go from up here to down here, just like that. And as we work this program, especially through like finding out what our defects are and continuing to work those through 10, 11, and then sponsorship, I think that's, and what Jesse was saying too about the family and the people closest to us. So like in the family unit and in our close, like romantic relationships and in sponsorship, these are the push points where you can wear, yourself pretty good, just do. But when you get close to people in an intimate way, it's like not sexually intimate, but when you're starting to get these relationships that are on a deeper level, that go to the spirit level, and you get pushed differently, and your defects are really, they're to the core, and things come up in the close relationships that don't come up in your work environment, and they don't come up when you're at the grocery store or even in Calgary rush hour, even though that's a big complaining point that people get mad. It's nothing like that. It's like when you're in your intimate relationships, you see yourself come up in ways that you don't see if you aren't in a relationship, and if you aren't sponsoring, and you see a reflection of yourself through sponsorship, because they're alcoholics as well, or addicts, or they, you have that common problem and the common solution in a way that you see into each other in a way that reflects you. And so there's so much more to be found in levels that you can't get to if you are not taking those opportunities on within the family and sponsorship.
Okay. Selfish self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all of our troubles, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation. But we invariably find that at some time in the past, we had made decisions based on self, which later placed us into a position to be hurt. I want you to underline, but we invariably found that at some time in the past, we've made decisions based on self, which later placed us into a position to be hurt. So when we talk about self, when we talk about making these decisions, right? Making these decisions on my own, right? That I know kind of what's best. This goes back, Bill had talked about the second delusion. We chat about the God of reason and we agnostic, which is essentially all my best reason, right? People say my best reasoning got me, right? Has to kind of do with the ideal dream that society sets off, but that's what true happiness is going to be. Now, there's a lot of, I know majority of people in society live, materialistic. They have the ability to, maybe they have a family, maybe they have some passions. They're not solely based in the world of the material. They do have things that are outside, like a family, maybe they go to church, whatever, and they're able to get by. For the alcoholic, these things are just 100% points. And why that is because human aid will always fail you. So an individual comes in here, like I said, and trying to get the world of the material back. And it's almost like he's putting a whole bunch of dominoes between him and the alcoholic insanity, thinking that in order to drink, I have to punch through every fucking domino. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. He sidesteps the whole fucking thing and goes right to the drink. So understanding that those thoughts will permeate all other affairs, it only makes sense that when I make decisions based on self, it will later place me in a position to be heard. Typically, that looks one of three ways. You will get fucked right now, right away. You pay the piper automatically. It's delayed, right? CRS, CRA. I don't pay my taxes now. They don't catch on to me for 3 years. There is, a certain percentage that's accrued. That's now triple what I was going to pay, right? That's an example of I'm not, I make the decision now. I pay the piper 3 years down the road, or you pay for fucking 3, 4 years, 5 years. Credit card's a good example of that, right? So how you hedge against that goes back to a conversation I had said before. You are bringing God-centered members into your decision making.
And I think when people are coming into recovery and the drive is to get the material stuff back, there's a miss there, because it's like that. I think that person is still thinking about alcohol was the problem and not understanding that they were the problem. And if they don't continue to address themselves, it doesn't matter how much material stuff is out there, because they're still gonna fail, because our failures arise out of us and they cause our problems. And so understanding that that's happening, it chases in the different direction for me. When I read that, I don't know why it jumped out to me that day, and I was like, it arises out of me and causes my failure. And I just was like, I saw it that day, and I was in treatment, and I was like, holy shit, like the problem is me and it's not the alcohol. And I actually became convinced in that moment. I remember it so clearly that the problem was me, and that it wasn't going to be all of these external fixes that was going to make me feel better. And in fact, if I didn't fix myself and actually figure out what step 6 and 7 was, because that was really not clear to me at the time. If I didn't figure that out with the desperation of a drowning person, that it wouldn't matter about the material stuff. It wouldn't matter about any of that stuff, because even if I got it, I'd lose it anyways, or I would get it and I would be miserable. So I just became convinced reading that one line, that I was like, wow, like this shit rises from me and it's caused my failure. It has never been the substance. And so it became very important for me to figure the rest of it out, which started my kind of journey. But I just wanted to share a story about this, the position to be hurt thing, because I like to share stories to people sometimes, because it brings it to life and it makes more sense to me when I hear an example. So I love my mom. I just use her as an example because she's just classic. She is classic. Al-Anon should be there. But anyway, so we were walking the dogs, and I was maybe like 6 months into recovery, and I was like feeling pretty passionate about it. And she had talked to Bill one time. Bill had called and she answered the phone, and she had a conversation, and she like was listening to him, and she's like cringing at the swears, but she was like, he had some really interesting stuff to say for you alcoholics, she said. I'm like, Mom, that stuff would apply to everybody. Like, and he had been talking about fear and decisions and whatever. So anyways, she was kind of interested, but never listening for her. And she started telling me this story at the beginning of May. And she was talking about the hairdresser, and she went and she had already bought hair shampoo. and she went to the hairdresser and she bought more hair shampoo because this hairdresser was saying like, oh, this hair shampoo is the best shampoo. And so she's in the chair going, how am I going to say no? How am I going to, she really obviously wants me to buy this shampoo, but I just bought a gallon yesterday. And so I don't know, maybe I'll buy it and return it. So she's telling me this and I'm like, that is a horrible move, Mom. Like, you just got to say what's on your mind, and just like, that's a really easy example. Like, just say what's on your mind. She's like, well, anyways, I'm going to bring back this shampoo. So she's telling me this. So she went to the store, and like Jesse was just talking about, is like, you get fucked right away with some of this stuff. And here she goes to the store and she couldn't return it because they didn't have the return button programmed into the thing, into the debit machine. So she comes back complaining, and we walk our dogs every day, right? And my mom talks a lot. And so she's telling me about this thing and how could they not have this refund button? And I tried to return this and then it wasn't there and it was a waste of time. I waited for 20 minutes for them to figure it out. So she goes back again to return it, and she couldn't because the manager wasn't there. So then I heard about that. And then she went back about 4 or 5 times, and they ended up having to call the bank to come and program this button into the machine. And there was a manager involved, and it was the end of the month and I'm so sick of hearing about this shampoo. And I'm like, well, you put yourself in this position when you acted in fear, or you didn't act, and you should have said something. And now look, you got the ball rolling, and now it's a big snowball over a fucking bottle of shampoo. Like, you did this to you when you didn't speak up. Oh, well, I know. And so she goes to finally get this refund, and she's describing this scene to me. So we're walking and she's talking, and she's like, and she goes, and then, so her hairdresser, I can't remember what her name is, and she was there and she was crying, and she said, I'm sorry, Janet, I feel so bad that you've had to come 5 times and this has been horrible, and I hope you still come and get your hair cut. And I am disgusted listening to this. I'm like, thinking of this total chaos that she has caused just by one small decision, that she chose to act in fear, not say what was true for her. And she bought it thinking she could refund it later. She's pushing back on this, what she should do. And it just built up and caused this huge commotion. Girls are crying, and it's this big thing. And she says to the girl, she goes, well, it's just bad customer service. And so I lost it. And I was like, what do you mean it's bad customer service? I'm like, this was you when you did this and you caused this. And so anyways, I really have that in my mind of whenever I read that, I'm like, one small move. And if you think about the whole world doing that, like people who just aren't okay with saying what's on their mind, and they people please, and they have the fake smiles for a couple times, and then they're, not satisfied behind the back. All these problems, they come to a head. If you don't deal with the conflict in front of you, it's still there. It's going to come up in some way, and it's going to be, dealt with in some way, shape, or form when it does surface. And so it makes me think of like all the little actors running around like that, causing all the commotion by not saying what they really think. So it's like, in my head, I have like all these people in their hairdressing chairs on one day, say, and they're all buying shampoo they don't want, and they're all trying to return it. Well, just that across the planet causes chaos. And that's just a bottle of shampoo. So.
Okay, so just quickly on this. When we're talking about decisions based in self, majority of these decisions are based in the delusion, like was already chatted about. And so that is going to be centered in the material world. So that is, you have no money, you buy a black on black BMW. Okay. That is, you just come in here, you should be focused on this. You're talking to me about fucking oil and gas. Okay. You are, 1 month going to meetings, you just found your fucking wife at a CMA meeting. That's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about decisions that oppose the grace of God. And for anybody who is listening to the individual telling you, because the situation, really the dynamic is, he is the salesman, I'm supposed to be the buyer, okay? Now he's thought about whatever the fuck he's gonna try and sell me for a week plus. And then he lays the perfect pitch. And it's easy to get caught up in it. There might be a violin attached to it. Jess, I've been working so hard, just this, just that. And you could get caught up in it. You're like, yeah. You give your head a shake. You're like, what the fuck are you talking about? Not only what the fuck are you talking about, but what are we talking about? And it's easy if you are centered, even in your, whether it's in your own life or whether you're sponsoring individuals, it makes a little difference. It will come up in your sponsor-sponsee relationships, will definitely come up in your life. You know? And it's easier to spot in your sponsees than it is in your own. You know, you got a guy who's sober 8 months, you know, really working at it. You know, maybe he's in the trades. He wants to buy a $30,000 used fucking black on black Mercedes Benz. That's what it looks like. It looks like a complete fucking outlier, right? Decisions based on self. It doesn't look like that. Alcoholism doesn't look like alcoholism, especially when it's coursing through your veins and you're fully fucking active. Because what happens is that when you are beaten down by your own selfish decisions, you come in here, you need help, the pride reasserts itself. When the pride reasserts itself, the individual is already drunk. Without the drink, it's only a matter of time. And then they'll just fill their life with fucking decisions based on self, then they'll be drunk. You can't really tell them anything, right? So the hope is that by the time they're 12 stepped and try to make a go of it, that's really where, you know, the step 6 comes in. And I know Bill, he loves talking about fucking step 6 on every single step. He will try to fucking work a couple angles on 6. And it's good because it's important. But the simple fact is not only like on this step, it's an education. You're essentially free giving the individual information. It's theories. You come in here, we hit step 1, you have facts, you have experiences galore on that. When it comes to this, it's all theories, all of them, for the most part, for the new individual. You lay down the groundwork, you give them the theories, they fucking walk into it, right? Hopefully they call. I mean, there's a good chance that they're just going to be operating in soft until shit really hits the fan, right? They're fucking totally gone. And there may be the chance you can't talk to them. The hope is they arrive at that bottom of self. If they arrive at that bottom of self and get that glimmer of humility that they got by the time they came in here, then they got a shot. Any questions on that?
So for, it says we decided to turn my will and my life over. Is it all right for me to think that my will and my life and my thought and my actions never have that negative thought, that negative, I act out in a negative, dishonest, selfish, ignorant way, my shit gets fucked up with somebody, that's what I should be turning over to my sponsor pillars?
I really wouldn't worry about that too much. What I would worry about, so if the alcoholic problem centers in the mind, so you have a mind component, you have a body component, that means that the solution has to be of the mind and of the body. So if you look at the God of the mind's a perspective, and the first perspective we get in this information up to this point is God is everything or he's fuck nothing, black and white. And the alcoholic addict's very black and white. For me, I could bite into that. That was tangible. It's either he's absolutely everything, what I perceive to be good, what I perceive to be bad, or he's fucking nothing. That means I can't have him over here in career, finance, and my addiction, but then in my love life and everything else, Jesse gets the fuck around. It's all God or it's absolutely nothing. That's the perspective, right? But then when you look at the body, you know, you have that intuition, that gut. It's the right or wrong. Somebody says something, you're in a situation and you get a clench, right? That is the God of the body. That conversation is useless really right now because you don't bore open the channel till 5, right? So what you would pay attention to without getting too far along is when we sincerely take such a position. That's the actual action of this step. Like right now where we're at is this is how you fucking don't do it. And you don't bring self into it. Forget about it, right? First of all, we quit playing God ourselves, yourself, it doesn't work next, right? Like that's more action towards it. Janine?
Yeah, I like what you were saying there. I like the idea of using this step as almost like this is coming up and having these conversations that your ego is rebuilding really fast, and this is what it's going to look like, and this is what it's going to play out like, and God is everything or he's nothing. So you got to have it all in here when you go into this next step, because self is coming back real full speed. Like I remember when I was drinking, it was like I was quitting drinking, and then 3 days would go by and I'd forget. That's how fast my ego was rebuilding. Like I had to be really broken to get that pause that I could even get into this a little bit. And so really, like what I love this step, because it like what you were saying, it's warning you. It's like, this is what's happening, and the problem isn't the substance, it's you, and it's manifesting in all different ways, and you got to get a handle on it. And if you don't, like, you're screwed. You have to get a handle on what's going on. You have to be convinced that any life run by you is going to be a disaster. And so that's like what you're trying to get your sponsee to get to before their ego's rebuilding. And that's why this step has to be finished by them starting step 4. Because any time spent not doing that, like this should be like you said, the salesman, you're trying to sell it to them that this is what they need. You got to launch. And I really liked how you said that. That's all.
Okay, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is almost the most extreme example that could be found. A self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of selfishness. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible, and there is no way of entirely getting rid of self without him. You may have moral and philosophical convictions galore, but you can't live up to them even though you would have liked to. Neither can you reduce your selfish self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on your own willpower. You must have God's help. And the alcoholic is almost the most extreme example that could be found. A self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. And so that is to say that I have the ability to operate in self, believing that it's God's will. And I have the ability to do that constantly, especially through step 11. If I'm not getting consistently grounded, and I am getting these intuitive thoughts, and I'm not bringing God-centered pillars into that, and I'm just going into these situations half-cocked, without any conversation, without any grounding. I mean, I am 100% operating my life, 100% calling all the shots. And it's only a matter of time before I fucking pay the piper. But I really like that, though he usually doesn't think so. That is to say that eventually there will come the time where God's will and my own will gets fucking skewed. Very easy for that to happen. I come into this program, I'm fucking homeless, I'm penniless, I'm fucked all over the place. All of a sudden I need these things. Maybe I need a car, I get that. Maybe a relationship with the wife comes back, maybe I get a half-decent job. In the first year, it looks as if God's will is my own will. A lot of people will say that the first year is a gift. And, although the first year is difficult, there's a lot of things that make it, easier at the very least. So that is to say that you are newer, people are going to flock around you, people actually give a shit. They'll clap when you walk into a room, they'll pat you on the back, oh, you got a job, oh, you made it on time, blah, blah, blah. Second year, that's all done. Fucking forget about that. You got the book, you got the solutions, nobody gives a fuck now. You're the furniture in the back. Oh, Jerry, yeah, he's always here pouring coffee. Nobody's clapping, nobody's nothing. Not only that, is in my second year, I learned very quickly that God's will and my own are two completely fucking different things. I haven't come here and agreed with much about God's will for my own life. That's just the way I am. I wasn't ever meant, I don't believe, for this. And I believe most alcoholics deal with that. I was under the impression that if an individual came in here and got this, they were primed for it. Maybe there was some sort of Christianity or God in the family or whatever. And then, they came in here and I did not believe that anybody had the ability to have as much contention to some sort of a higher power, or God as I call him, than myself. And talk about selfish, self-centered, and egotistical. There's not one man that I've ever worked with that has really accepted this, you know, with open arms and has smiled and all that other shit. And if he does, he's fucking lying. He's lying to himself and he's lying to you. Because really what's happening is you're saying what's going to happen and he's just nodding. That's the guy who blows his brains out. That's the guy who's drinking right after the session. He nods, yes, Jesse. Oh, I love it. Oh, God, I got to give it all up. Can't fucking wait. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And then I don't hear from him for 6 months because he's off on a tear. If a guy combats me and we agnostic and in this information, that's what I'm looking for. At least he's honest with me, right? Mm-hmm. We'll find something tangible. Janine?
Oh, I was thinking about something. Let me just pull it back to my mind. Yeah, it was worth saying, I think. I think it was worth saying. Oh yes, I was thinking about how self-will, how I noticed it coming up for myself, but it's hard to see it. Like it's really, I went into a stupid thing, I won't get into it, but I went into a stupid move, I don't know, like a month ago. And then when I was talking to some pillars about it, they were like, why didn't you phone anybody? And I was like, I didn't even see it was an issue till it was an issue after, and it wasn't going down the way that I thought, right? But I can see it in other people, and it sounds like a lot of the justifications and the rationalizing and them trying to convince me that it's okay, you know. Well, I'm thinking of a couple of recent examples of just meetings, like this particular person's like debating the meetings, where one meeting is there's, you know, the X and there's the situation and, you know, but go to a different meeting. And then there's the backlash from that. And they're telling me this and they're telling me that. And so I found that if I just stop them and say, what are you packing into the stream of life? And we have a conversation around that, and it can kind of unpack, maybe not about that issue, but because that's what it is. It's like self-will is, what can I get for me? How do I want this to go? This is what I want to do, and this is why, and this is the best thing for me, and this is why. This is the best thing for everybody else, and this is why. So it's like, what are you, like, where's the thy will be done here? Like, where's the thy will be done? And that can open up conversation in a different way. So I found that asking somebody that is really helpful. If you notice that they're rationalizing and justifying pretty good at it. That's all.
This is the how and why of it. First of all, quit playing God yourself. It doesn't work. Next, decide that hereafter in this drama of life, God is going to be your director. He is the principal, you're to be his agent. He is the father, you to be his child. Get that simple relationship straight. Double underline that. Do you want to know what step 3 is? It's getting that simple relationship straight. That'll be the dynamic of God being the father, you being the child, God being the employee, you being the employer. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept is to be the keystone of the new and triumphant arc through which you will pass to freedom. When you sincerely take such a position, what position are they talking about?
God is everything, God is nothing.
God is everything, God's nothing. A little bit more out of the text, though, out of what we just read.
God is going to be our director.
Yep. God is the director, we are the agent. He is the father, we are the child. You know, he is the employer, we are the employee. When we sincerely take such a position, all sorts of remarkable things follow. You have a new employer being all powerful. He must necessarily provide what you need if you keep close to and perform his work well. Established on such a footing, you become less and less interested in yourself, your little plans and designs. More and more you become interested in seeing what you can contribute to life. As you feel new power flow in, as you enjoy peace of mind, as you discover you could face life successfully, as you become conscious of his presence, you begin to lose your fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. You will be reborn. So if we just kind of go back right nice and quick, the first requirement is that you see that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. This is the how and why of it. First of all, quit playing God yourself. It doesn't work. Next, decide that hereafter in this drama of life, God is going to be your director. When you sincerely take such a position, what position?
God is going to be our director.
All sorts of remarkable things will follow. This is the step 3 promises. And the step 3 promises come when I quit fucking playing God myself, when I let God take over, and really how I operate that, how I operate this sincere position is I do absolutely everything in my fucking power that is possible, work-wise. And then I fucking let it go. And then I know without a shadow of a doubt that whatever the outcome is God. If I leave a sliver there, you know, for example, if I'm working on some deal and I shot numbers off to manufacturers and I went off of old numbers and I shot off the deal before the manufacturers got back to me, they gave me better pricing. It's always going to be up in the air. You know, if I don't get that deal, is that more self or is that God, right? And it could be a large situation, but quite commonly, it's just that little what if. Is that actually fucking God, that outcome? Or is that a decision based on self? And if I do absolutely everything in my power for every aspect of my life, career, finance, relationship, health, reputation, I do absolutely everything in my power, that outcome must surely be God. That's how I sincerely take such a position. Janine?
Yeah, I think that a key part of it is actually doing everything that you possibly can, because God can't get in there if there's no action taken. There's been a couple of things that happened in my journey here that I look back and I'm like, oh, maybe I should have taken action and the outcome would have been different. Anyways, yeah, so I think that actually having the courage to take the action steps, and then also when things are not flowing, to stop forcing and take my hands off of it, because you know that isn't the direction I'm supposed to be going. So there's some areas of my life that is easy for me to do that, like work, right? I can apply to a lot of jobs and then just see what happens, interview the best I can. If I do a shitty interview, I can feel like I could have interviewed better. But if I do an interview to the best of my ability and I don't get the job, which just happened because of like a seniority situation, I didn't get all down about it. And I wasn't like, oh, this is so unfair. It's just like, that is how it goes. And I don't fight it, but I do show up for things. And in the areas where I need to work at it more is like where I'm indecisive and I'm not quite at a place like with the meditation and the intuitive thoughts, and like I still find that I get confused and I don't take action even like when I'm trying. So for me in my recovery, because I'm only a year and a half sober, not even yet, when I'm reading this, it's like all these things will happen, you're going to have a new employer, the promises and all these remarkable things. I think that there's a patience aspect to that too, because as I come to believe, I'm coming to believe because I am doing the legwork and seeing how things play out, and then things play out and they're okay. And I see like, okay, like I have enough traction now to look back and see how the dots are connecting, and that it's okay when I'm stepping into uncertainty, that when I'm doing these things, I have been okay. And I see that looking back that, oh, this worked like that. And oh, I met this person and then this happened, or like just even how I got to Calgary was kind of a miracle looking backwards. So I think that for the people that I work with that are newer than I say like, this doesn't happen overnight. Like, yes, these promises look awesome and remarkable things will follow, but they don't follow tomorrow, and they don't follow without action. So you have to take the action and you have to have patience, because like your life isn't needing to be rebuilt next week. Like we took a long time to destroy it. And the most important thing is like to show up and to keep trusting that God's everything, even when it feels like you don't know where you're going, and just keep at it. And then these promises come true. They're more true for me today than they were 6 months ago, than they were a year ago, right? So that's all.
So we're about to read the third step prayer, with which, yep.
Question for you, Jim. I don't think it's quite understand. You say that you're printing an estimate and you had a price together and you're going to sell it for that price, and then somebody came through and said, I got a better price for you, and you took that better price, but maintained the same original cost to the purchaser, and you made more money than you thought you were going to make?
No. So what'll happen is that I have all the, let's say I have all the costing, which I do, right? and I just write up a bid based on that. Instead of going to the manufacturer with like a bigger bid, like let's say, they're going to give me a more aggressive cost. And this is just an example that I go off of like almost day-to-day pricing and I don't get the bid, right? Then all of a sudden, because I shot that off, I see the new vendor cost that they're giving for me to be more aggressive, right? And then I could have used that to potentially get the bid. But that's a very small little example. And what that is me essentially going half-cocked into a situation without doing my proper due diligence, right? And that's what I mean. I will exhaust every fucking possible avenue that I could think of, right? Through an intuitive thought and that type of stuff, meditation, if it's a situation that's driving me. And instead of doing it on self, which is what I just described, that situation, doing it and then having the numbers come back and then just, in the back of my mind, what if I waited, right? What if I actually did everything? A job interview is that's a very good example too. Doing all my due diligence. If this is going to be a job interview on Zoom, well, how the fuck do you do that? What does that look like? What do you wear? What's supposed to be in the backdrop? All that kind of stuff. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about exhausting absolutely everything at my fingertips and then giving that up. Right? So let's say I do that interview, which I did. I had to do an interview over Zoom a year and a half ago, and I didn't know a goddamn thing about how that's supposed to go. So I researched the shit out of it. Right? I found a normal backdrop in the house. I got half decent lighting. I used an earpiece, right? That you could hear directly what I'm talking about, right? And I got that job, but that's not the point. The point is that on my end, I will exhaust absolutely every avenue, and then I will give that outcome up to God. Does that make more sense? Does that answer your question?
I guess I'm thinking about ethical issues.
So what about what I said wasn't ethical?
No, it wasn't. It's my question in my own.
Okay.
Have I exhausted everything? I've given, trying to make.
Well, I mean, that's always going to be the question. You can't make too much money because you have competition, right? And so if I try and gouge you, you go down the street and you get the deal for X amount cheaper. It's a free market system, and thank fuck we have it. Okay. So this is the step 3 prayer, right? Without exception, this is done on the knees. Typically, I work with guys in my car just because it's mobile. It's the easiest way. Maybe I'll pick them up. Maybe they drive to me, whatever the case may be. I've been sponsored out of my car for fucking 6+ years, and that ain't gonna change, right? Anyways, and so when we do that, it's always the bumper of the car. Always. And so, like I mentioned previous, that this pride could reassert itself. Individual comes into the program, he says, Jesse, please sponsor me, this, that, he's crying, I'm in pain, blah, 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 this, that. And he doesn't call me tomorrow. What is that? That's the pride reasserting. It's a pride reasserting itself. That's the God of reason telling him that it actually wasn't that way. This time will be different. I just need this, and this. If I could manufacture that in the way that I want, all will be well. So it is common for the selfish, self-centered nature to bleed into the 12 steps. And by the time they're 12 step, the biggest red flag is that they don't have to sponsor anybody. Right? Where that's the first session we chat about that. That's a consistent fucking theme throughout the whole thing. And now all of a sudden you don't have to sponsor something, right? And maybe my answer is not in the program. Maybe I should see a psychiatrist, all self-oriented, And why they've arrived at that point is selfish, self-centered has bled into the 12 steps. So when an individual gets down on his knees, like, oh, we'll be at Tim Hortons, I'll park right in front of the Tim Hortons, make sure that people can see, and we're going to make this decision together. And I'm not trying necessarily to humble the guy, although that is a byproduct. I want to see if he will make this decision in front of other people. You know, it's the same when an individual drinks. Let's say I've sponsored a guy for a couple of months. He drinks, he's off on a run. He calls me in a month or so and says, you know, Jess, I'm ready to do it, this, that. And I say, okay, go to detox. It's not necessarily that I think detox is magical or anything like that. It's a firm decision. And if this guy is remorseful and makes a firm resolution not to drink again, then I know the odds are the allergy of the body is done. So it's a little bit more that. It's not really the process of humiliation. It's more the process that he's willing to do this. It's the willingness. Because you got to remember, up to this point, what has this guy really done? Maybe I've picked him up, might have bought him a couple fucking coffees. No work at this time, right? 4 hasn't come along, 5 hasn't come along. It's pretty breezy up to this point. So it's a little bit more the willingness than anything else. Anybody have questions on that?
It's pretty breezy, guys.
Okay, we're going to try your willingness now. Get down upon your knees and say to your maker as you understand him. I want everybody to start at God.
God, why don't you get on your knees?
God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me, to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help by thy power, thy love, thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Think well before taking the step. Be sure you are ready, that you could at last abandon yourself utterly to him. It is desirable that you make your decision with an understanding person. It may be your wife, your best friend, your spiritual advisor. But remember, it is better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. You must decide this for yourself. The wording of your decision is, of course, quite optional, so long as you express the idea, voicing it without reservation. This decision is only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, will be felt at once. And so when it says voicing it without reservation, that's all. I'll do 2 parts. So it'll be on the bumper of the car. He will read. I'll be on my knees as well. And then I'll have him voice it without reservation, which is he says it completely in his own words. Anything to say on that?
No, I think, well, I guess I will say, I take this approach too with sponsees, and it was uncomfortable for me, but it was told that I had to. And so it's just like, oh, do you want to get on your knees or like, I don't know. And so now it's become just comfortable. So even if you're uncomfortable, that's your own shit, and you don't want to deprive the newcomer of like proper sponsorship or getting this experience done thoroughly. So get over your own shit and just get on your knees with them and do the prayer, because that's what the step's all about.
Oh, okay. Well, you ever do this stuff?
Yeah, he's asking, have you ever done step 3 on Zoom where you got on your knees with the person on camera?
Yeah, there's certain steps on Zoom that won't have the impact, and that's one of them. Right? Like you can do it. Sometimes you have to. You know, it's common that a guy will come down here for treatment and then go back to BC or go back to Saskatchewan. That does happen, or Northern Alberta. Then you got to do it on the phone, right? You just got to trust that he's doing it. But the impact will be lost. You will lose some impact. But it's still possible to get the message across, but it's not the same. It's like half. It's the same with a 5, right? For sure. When you're in a 5, you know, if you are to start probing on certain questions and you can see that he's uncomfortable, you know, body language, you can see if, you know, maybe this is where you need to go, or maybe you don't, conversation, asking questions, or you're losing a lot of impact. But it is what it is, right? Okay, so this is 63.
Are you switching to the book?
Yeah, so right now we're in the big book. This will be 63, bottom of the page. Next, we launch out on a course of vigorous action. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, It can have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which has been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we now get down to the causes and conditions. So the simple fact is like, if the step 3 is not followed immediately by the 4, then you lose momentum and you lose impact completely. Typically how this works for me, depending on the severity of the individual that I'm working with, it'll be 3 sessions to 4. So out of the 3 sessions, the 3rd session would be all of we agnostic, all the way up to resentment step 4. So we would essentially have a God conversation, then we would do 3, and then he leaves me on resentments 4. Right? And that's how you capitalize on all these conversations 1 session. The only problem with it is that you got to remember retention rate. Like if you're dealing with a guy who just came off the street, you know, like his eyes are rolling in the back of his head, like he can't even keep his head up. I mean, that session alone could be 3.5 hours, right? So you got to be mindful of retention rate. But if you could bang it all off in 1 session, really all the heavy, hard-hitting, solution-based conversations in 1 meeting, that means that you've had 2 meetings that are fucking dismal, right? If you are on, there's a doctor's opinion, halfway through, there's a solution. Doctor's opinion is all problem, which is the allergy of the body. Then you were talking halfway through that chapter, there's a solution, is solution-based. So you end on a little bit of solution, but then your second session is all fucking problem. And it's all the mental blank spot, right? The plausible excuse, the insane trivial excuse, right? So you leave them on that, then you follow up with, I mean, nothing short of a whole God-centered session. Retention rate, though. Janine?
I'm just thinking about what I think if the session, you don't have the time, I think that you end on a point and then you start and you summarize again what you went over and make sure that it's stuck and that they know what's up before you go on. And I think that if you can't get it all done like that, to review it and build on it and keep doing that and make sure you can. I think that you wouldn't want to leave without the God. It doesn't make sense to me to because you're building up to why we're going to launch, right? So to break it up, it takes the momentum right out of it. So really to get the God thing in there and to sell them on the 3 so that they're launching on the 4. And I agree, leaving at the resentment stuff. So at the point of after resentment, how long do you leave?
So on resentments is 2 weeks. There is a grace period for a man with a family that is a wife, that is a spouse, common law, and kids. I could be flexible about a week, but there has to be a hard and fast timeline, non-negotiables. If I don't put that in place, this guy's not fucking getting it done. And so you got 2 weeks on resentments. If it's that second week and you haven't done anything, the odds are, I'm going to tell you, you got now a week to do it, or you're looking for another sponsor, just as simple as that. And then after they get it done, let's say it's 2 weeks, which for the most part, they stay to that timeline. 2 weeks on resentments, they have a week for fears and sex conduct.
So I was setting you up to say, what about the sponsee that's like, if I sit on it too long, I'm going to relapse. I'm bringing up all of this stuff and it's too hard for me.
Well, it depends the severity. I mean, I've had men get their step 4 done in a couple days. I've had them get it done in a week. Depends the severity. But if they're in a treatment center, generally you have a little bit of time. Okay. You know, if he's not going home to a basement apartment, that type of situation, absolutely no safety net, nobody, lonely. He thinks he's going to drink tonight. Those types of things, that we're going to move pretty fucking quick.
Because I really have seen it spin people out. And so what do you do in those situations? Like, do you have a conversation first, or how does that look for you when you're sponsoring?
Well, quite typically, like, you know, when they're in resentments, if they're stuck in the first 2 columns, it's who has fucked you and how did they fuck you. You know what I mean? There's no spiritual value can be found in the first two columns. So let's say they got 25 resentments, and they're for those 25 resentments, they're doing it column by column by column. For the first maybe week of doing that, they're going to be stuck in the fucking mess pretty badly. So generally what I'll tell my guys is if it's 25, you'll do 10, which is the first two columns. And then you'll switch it up for the third column, right? So they're not totally stuck for all 25 first two columns, right? Does that make sense? We'll kind of switch it up. So let's say you work the first, yep.
Do you have a minimum?
No, but I do go by age though. You're, well, if you're a 75-year-old man and you have fucking 5 resentments, that's pretty alarming, isn't it? I'll also ask how long their 5 was. What's the longest 5 you've ever done? That's a question I always ask. You know, and if he's middle-aged, you know, maybe 35 to 45, and you're saying you've done an hour step 5, that's fucking alarming. So I know that you haven't done a step 5. That's what I know. You don't sum up 45, let's say a solid 3 decades of drinking and causing some havoc in an hour. It's just not fucking possible. So generally I'll go off of that. You know, when it comes to a 5, it's going to be, the 5 will actually consist of anywhere between 10 and 15 resentments. Like that's the bulk of the 5. That'll be mother, father, sibling, maybe ex-wife, husband, whatever, business partner, you know, good friend, whatever, 10, 15. And that'll be, that 10, 15 could potentially be 5 to 7 hours alone, right? Typical 5 is anywhere between 7 and 14 hours, give or take.
Further columns, we could just do it in point form.
Well, we'll get to the columns. I don't want to get too far ahead. In fact, I don't even know if we'll make that. I have a funny feeling we won't. And then Bill will kind of go in there. But maybe before I leave, we might chat about that and just what that looks like briefly.
Sure.
I think it would be helpful if we did save some time just to get your perspective since you're not going to be back next week.
For shine. Okay.
Okay.
Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsellable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways is what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. So the common manifestations that we're looking at is we are looking at resentment, we're looking at fear, and we're looking at sex conduct, right? A man or an individual doesn't typically lie in the resentments, nor does he lie in the fears, but he will most definitely lie in the sex conduct. Thank you.
Yep.
That's where all the guilt and shame is. Any questions on that? Now, Bill will probably say this, and I'll mention it here. When it comes to resentments, you know, I'm working with a guy, I give him resentments. He says, Jess, I don't have any resentments. If I had a fucking nickel for every time a guy told me that, I would be in some fucking tropical place, white sand. I would have been retired a couple of years ago. Why is that though? How is that so common? That's without exception, just about every individual I have worked with has told me that. Why is that? What, truthfully, that's a good answer. But typically what it is that in that moment, those resentments aren't activated. Majority of these resentments, so if you look at the effects mind, which is the third column, there's 5 effects mind, right? If this resentment holds all 5 effects mind, that's a fucking strong resentment. That resentment alone can have the individual drink no problem. That resentment alone can block them from something spiritual. That blocks the channel. He will not have the sunlight of the spirit, and insanity will recover, and he will drink again. No two ways around it. But majority of these resentments are like anywhere is between, 1 to 3 star, 4 star, right? So when I said, 10 to 15 resentments, those are 5-star resentments. Now he might have 50, but the other ones are going to be 1s and 2s, 1 star, 2 star, ambition, self-esteem, security, right? Personal relations, ambitions, right? And so these resentments aren't activated until this person texts, until he's at work, until he's in the room, he sees this person.
And I think too, that by the time you're doing the resentments with somebody, they've gotten some reprieve, they've gotten some relief, they've gotten some sort of like hope, and that buffers them from remembering some of these resentments. Leave it a little bit and you start getting sponsors being like, I forgot this, I forgot that, blah, blah. And then they're resentful at 10 more people and they're having a really shitty day because of they've been having, a shitty week, and they've been, like they're not as fit spiritual condition or whatever. They're just in a different headspace because they've not been working up on their program, and all kinds of resentments come out of the woodwork when that happens. And I think it's because when they're doing this, when I was doing this, I had less than after, when life got a little bit tough and I went through a second round of steps. I'm like, oh yeah, and this and that, but I was in a different place. And I think that that's a difference too.
So while we're looking at all these resentments, it's quite typical that, for me, when it comes to the really larger stuff, it's easy to spot and it's easier to bring God into. But when it comes to, I slept through the alarm, I got coffee on my white shirt, the car has no gas in it, I forgot to gas it up the night before, maybe I get a speeding ticket, which has been fucking common this year. Then I come into the office. Then I fucking listen to Jerry, or, a client I don't necessarily like calls me, and then that's the opportunity. That's the time at which, like, if I am blocked at that moment, that could easily be a slip. Like, doing all this work and trying to keep the channel clear, we're doing all this for that one moment. There might have been, before I came in here, out of 10 situations, I might have been able to, have sanity for 8 situations, but then there's those 2. That's why we're doing all this work, is for that one split second moment. That's what it's all for, right? And so it's a fucking massive liability if I have resentments, whether they're 1 or 3 star, all over my life, which I did. And I did that to keep a constant IV drip of anger between the drink and the drug. Because without the drink and the drug, I still need something to get me out of me, and anger is a very good fucking tool to do that. If I keep a constant state of irritability, the problem is, much like the drink, is if I am constantly irritable, you look at me the wrong way, I fucking lose my mind, right? Much like the drink and the drug, where I don't know what's going to happen when I pick up, anger is no fucking different. I start yelling at the windshield, somebody cuts me off, fucking game over, except for I start looking at all these areas, just resentments alone. I start cleaning all these things, and I don't have any Achilles heels anywhere. I can be properly present, and I can deal with each circumstance in my life as it comes. So my whole life was dealing with a world of shit, then this. My anger was unwarranted in almost every situation of my life, because I wasn't fully present, just dealing with that alone. It was life is shit, and then this, right, Janine?
Yeah, it's like if you have never taken the time to actually sort through, like it's talking about with the stock and trade, and going through and looking at the facts and facing it all and sorting it out, then it's like it's just this big shitstorm in the plumbing, in the channel, and you're projecting constantly whatever's at you. It's are you mad at this, or are you mad at the 30 years of that? And so as you sort it out, you start to become present, and you're able to deal with things as they come. But I think too, like what he was saying about, eventually there comes a time when you really need to have had that channel clear, because if you let little things build up, it's like you don't have enough to withdraw when you need to. And so I guess I have the analogy of the bank account, right? Where it's like I do this stuff, do recovery stuff, and then when shit hits the fan for me, it's not as much turbulence because I have some deposits in the bank, I suppose, that I'm able to tap into, and that's enough to get me back on track, where I'm like, okay, I need to like actually pray here. I got to call someone. It's not a knee-jerk reaction into self, because I've been keeping myself in decent spiritual condition. So I think that the blank mental spot, I've said this before, is like I've had it happen once where I thought about like drinking pretty hard, and that was a result of not doing what I needed to do for a series of days, and kind of just sitting in self and having this perverse, like it was like, it didn't feel good, but it did, like it was, I don't know. There's a part in the book about it that Bill quote. Well, no, it's like do you know what I mean, Jesse? Chasing the melancholy down the.
Yeah, that's step 4 in the 12.
Yeah, it was like that. And
Pursuing this perverse melancholy.
And I saw for the first time, I was like, holy shit, this is how people drink. Because I sat in this enough, and I had like barely enough to like actually do what I needed to do, because it scared me. And I could see very clearly then how the mental blank spot can come and attack, but it doesn't come just like I'm sitting here today and it's boom. It comes as a result of a couple of things that you're not taking care of, and you sit there a bit, and then boom, something happens and you're fucked. So Bill also gave me a pointer that I was working with a sponsee that actually couldn't identify a lot of resentments, and like, I don't have any, and talked about like some people pleasing stuff, and like maybe she should be angry, and she is, but she couldn't tell, and we weren't getting anywhere. And he's like, get her to look up the definition of like anger and like print that out. And so there was a whole bunch of synonyms, like being annoyed and irritated, and some of those stuck out, and then we were able to get some traction with that. So just having a clearer definition that it's not just feeling like seething rage, and it's not just angry. It's like there's some things that stay stuck, and it's maybe a smaller slight, but it's still there, and on a bad day it can be even bigger. So that was a helpful tip.
There's no doubt that, at least as far as I know, Bill's probably going to do the 12 and 12 step 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I mean, when it comes to the 12 and 12, the 12 and 12 will not sober you up. That's the simple fact. It's not the book to get you sober. That is the big book. And that is the first book. And you could get away without the 12 and 12 with just that book, but you cannot get away with just the 12 and 12. So it's a companion, right? There's one book that's the word. There's one book that's a companion. The 12 and 12 is very, very good for step 4. And just understanding a lot of this, like what Janine's talking about, is the reactions of doing a step 4. And they're talking about the depressive type, who it's almost like they're giving themselves 40 lashes. They look at it, poor me. They pursue this perverse melancholy activity. And in fact, they're not doing a step 4, a moral inventory. They are leading themselves to the bottle just like they've done every other time. Then you have the grandiose, who is offended at AA's suggested inventory, moral inventory, that they believe that this one good character would come back. Alcohol is the problem. Minus that, I could go back to who I was before the drink and yada, yada. It talks about the repercussions that one could face. And also the sponsor dealing with a sponsee and what the sponsor can go through as well. More that dealing with a grandiose alcoholic type of stuff. It's fucking really good stuff. So, okay, resentment is the #1 offender, bottom of 64. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From it stem all forms of spiritual disease. We have not only been mentally, physically ill, we've been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. I want you to underline that. When the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Does anybody know what the spiritual malady is?
Restless, irritable, discontent.
Correct. Fucking ding, ding, ding. Just so happens you're a sponsee of mine. You're only half fucking points. We straight out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom you are angry. Underline that, put a 1 next to it. And that is, we listed them on, we put them on paper. We listed people, institutions, and principles with whom we are angry. That's your first column. We asked ourselves why we're angry. Underline that. That's your second column. Now, this is an explanation as to why you might be angry. In most cases, it is found that our self-esteem, pocketbooks, ambitions, or personal relations, including sex, were hurt or threatened. So we were sore, we were burnt up. So they go on to say on our grudge list, which that's all that is. That is the who and the what. So no spiritual value could be found in the first 2 columns. You shouldn't need help in the first 2 columns. Who fucked you and how did they fuck you? You've known that your whole life, right? Where an individual is going to need help, a sponsee would need help, is 3 and 4. Right? So those are the tricky things. Those are the things I've never looked at. Yes, I know this individual and I know what's happened, but I do not know how it's affected me. Right? And so in the 3rd column, which is on our grudge list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, security, ambitions, personal, or sex relations, which has been interfered with? I want you to underline that. From was it self-esteem all the way to sex relations. That's your 3rd column. That's the effects mind. So typically it is, so the resentment is the who, which is just but a name. And then the cause or what, that's a conversation. So in the what, that's where I'm going to get everything I need to get. And typically if it's mother, father, or the first 10 to 15, that's going to be the bulk of that resentment. I mean, for him to say the what on his father could be 2 hours, that piece of him. Right? But I'm going to let him talk as much as he wants. I'm going to ask him a ton of fucking questions. I'm going to try and get all the pieces. Then we'll look at the effects mind, which should be in order. You know, if it's father is the resentment, and, you know, because he left when I was 5 and left my mother to fend for herself with 2 other kids, 3 children in total. And I look at what did it affect? You know, it could be security. It could be financial security. If mom got a couple boyfriends in there and they were abusive, most likely security. So security would be financial. It would be physical and emotional. Most likely security. Self-esteem. Why did my father leave? What, he doesn't love me. Why does he not love me? Right? Ambitions, because I want to have a relationship with my father. Personal relations, because all my friends had fathers. Right? Maybe sex relations, potentially. Not knowing how to properly treat women. Right? But that would be an example of how you would go down the list.
I think to answer the question that came up a little bit ago, like you want to just tell them to point form because it becomes a talking point later. It's just like to get it down and to don't got to get into the whole story, just to point form, just so it jogs their memory when the conversation comes up.
And that's for the what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The what can be, I mean, the what has to be in point form because he's not writing fucking novels. There's no way. And if that's what he's going to do, he's pushing it off. Probably won't do it if that's what it's meant to be. So just point form, you know, he left me, you know, left my mother, was abusive to my mother, that type of stuff, point blank, all that. And then that could be elaborated in the 5.
I just want to say that there's a huge difference with doing this right out of the book, just pen and paper, versus doing it off of a treatment center worksheet. It's just a totally different experience. And I think that's because when you're doing a treatment center worksheet, it's like, you're kind of clicking everything. And it's like in the example Jesse was just having, it's like, okay, I'm resentful at my father. You got a space to write that. And then it's like checky boxes, like affects my this, and you're like, yep, it does, yep, it does, yep, it does, yep. And then it's like you're not even actually reflecting on what it affects and it's like it's leading the questions. So it was good enough for me to do that as a first initial, but I got a totally different experience when I did it just pen to paper with my sponsor later.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with a treatment center. You know, treatment center is where a lot of men
Mhm.
first come into contact with our roots. There's nothing wrong with that. You know, a lot of the times they give, you know, they take an individual off the street, they give them a bed, they give them meals, some sort of a recovery type of net, and that's all said and good. A lot of the times they're pushed towards the steps, they're pushed to get a sponsor. That's great, but there are motives, and don't fucking forget that. They can't sell you this. They can't. They have to sell you their own version of that, right? So when they do their own version, they're going to mix a whole bunch of shit in there. It's quite common. They will take pieces from the 12 and 12 and put it into the 12 steps. Or they'll start chatting about 500 and 600, resentment prayers found in 500 and all that other nonsense, right? Where when you go through a God-centered sponsor, he's not selling you on shit. Right? There's two different motives. One wants to see you get sober and well, so you can pack into the stream of life. One, maybe you get sober, maybe you don't.
You're paying me either way.
You're done 5, get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? So it's like there are obviously different motives. It's not to say they're not bad, but it is to say they're selling you something. And they can't actually sell you what you need to be sold. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Any questions on that? All right. We went back through our lives. Nothing counted but thoroughness and honesty. When we were finished, we considered it carefully. The first thing apparent was that the world and its people were often quite wrong. So if you notice, they give you an example, right? And the book assumes that you've done that example. All the information presented is under the assumption that you've done this work so far, okay? So if you haven't done the work and you read it, it could sound confusing from that, but the book assumes you've done the work. To conclude that others were wrong was as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continued to wrong us and we stayed sore. Sometimes it was remorse and then we were sore at ourselves. I want you to double underline that. Sometimes it was remorse and we were sore at ourselves. But the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the worse matters got. As in war, the victor only seemed to win. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. So when I talk about self bleeding into the 12 steps, that's a piece. What that looks like is this individual is going to do their resentment list and they're first on the list. And this alcoholic would love nothing more than to talk about themselves for 3+ hours, but all the terrible things they've done, maybe how they were wronged and this and that and that and this. And all that is the selfish, self-centered nature bleeding into the 12 steps. And you cut that the fuck out. The simple fact is, you know, has the individual done some shitty things? Sure. Do they feel remorseful for those shitty things? Absolutely. But this is not the fucking time, nor is it the place for them to have an open forum to chat about themselves, right? We're looking at their resentments. We're looking at their harms to those individuals that they resent. Does that make sense? Any questions on that? Has anybody done that before? Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people saying it yourself.
Yeah. You're just like fucking sure. Right? We have to get rid of self. Right? We have to, or it fucking kills us. So giving the alcoholic the opportunity for self to bleed in, is that not an injustice to the individual you're taking through the 12 steps? Now, the simple fact is you may be sponsoring individuals and you may not know that. Is that your fault if you don't know it? No. I mean, you're ignorant, right? And it's not you're purposely ignorant. You just don't know. If you know when you let it fly, what happens then? Whose fault is that? That's your fucking fault, right? But that is sponsorship. I mean, when I first started sponsoring, it was legitimately groping in the dark. I had no fucking idea what I was doing. Really. It was just simply reading a book with some individual. You know, it was only until maybe 10, 15 guys in that I started getting some idea. You know, I'm talking about things and they're hidden. You know, because I'm reading the literature so much, things are starting to click. I'm starting to see patterns here. But that's not all. Things were illuminated to me and then I was just the man. That's predominantly me and Bill. We had sponsored enough men over the time and we had grounded each other. So I would be reading something and then I get an intuitive thought to take it one way. And then all of a sudden it has impact. And I call up Bill and I say, what are your thoughts on this? This is the results I got. He tries it. Same results. It's that. And it's that way for 6-7 years we've been doing that for. What time do we got here? Okay, 5 minutes left. What I'm going to do is I am going to do an example on the back of this sheet of how I do the resentments with an individual. You guys can come up afterwards and take a look at it. The first 3 columns are going to be exactly in the book, which means that there's 2 lines. Okay. First column is who. Second column is what. Third column is affects my. Pretty simple. This is, I'm just going to read this last little piece, 67, halfway through the page, referring to our lists again. Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes, where we've been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. So selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened.
I just want to say, like, this is probably one of the most biggest impact for me that I'm so thankful for, is like that I don't have people co-signing my stuff and making me feel worse ultimately and do worse. So it's like the world and the people were wrong. Like a lot of times they had their part too. And if that's as far as we're getting, is that other people are wrong, we stay sore. Why do we stay sore? Because we go out and we do the same shit. And then what happens? People continue to wrong us. Why? Because we're doing the same shit. Because we're never looking at our parts. So it's like we keep doing the same shit. We keep getting sore and we're stuck in ourselves. Like we cause our own fucking shit. Our failures come from us doing the same shit over and over and over. So now we get to the key to the future, it says. We get the key to change. This is how we figure it all out, is we look at it from an entirely different angle.
Okay, so like I said, I'll leave this up. But there's the first 3 columns. There is selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened, then they're harm. Dishonesty is always where it starts. Okay, so for example, let's say it is my father, was abusive, left my mother on her own, right? And I'm sponsoring a guy who tells me this, let's say, it's a little bit easier. And I start asking him about his father. And just so happened that his father abused his mother, fucked off when he was 5. And it just so happens that his grandfather was an abusive drunk, right? And you start seeing that it's not necessarily that he wanted to do that. And it's not really what I think is that this man had all the chips and he withheld. He had the chips of how to properly father. He had the chips of, how to be a good man, but he was never given those chips. In fact, he just did to me what was done to him. Does that make sense? That's the dishonesty piece. As I never look at that. I never look at where these people come from. I never look at, their situation, how they grew up, all that other shit. And when you go through those 10 to 15 resentments, like I had mentioned in a 5, that's a lot of the discussion, is more the dishonesty piece, is more the lineage. The question is why? Why did his father do that? That's the question you ask yourself. And you're going to try and get him talking to answer that. And then you will rope it all the way in to their heart. Just so happens that he has a fucking kid. Just so happens that he bailed on the kid. Right? That's their heart. Right? So common that's the case. And I think with that, Janine, if there's anything else you want to say.
I think that's it. We are at time. We will close with the serenity prayer. And for everybody online, Tamara will take a picture of what Jesse just wrote out and put it in the WhatsApp group chat. If you're not on the WhatsApp group chat, join the WhatsApp group chat. Get the picture.
God,
God,
grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the willingness to know the difference. Amen, amen.